Nathaniel? Jonathan? Did I just hear that another episode went out with a guest on it?
What? Huh?
How did Tim get in here without my permission?
He was just here when we got here.
We thought you brought him in here.
Ah, that's right. I didn't I? I felt you needed a little assistance after the hot mess you made of the first episode.
Hot mess?
I thought it turned out great. I mean, apart from the Lego microphone I was talking into.
Yes, well, the Wheelmaster was using our new patron-provided mics for his gremlin orchestra rehearsal. And besides, the microphone situation was the least of your problems. You sorely needed more personality.
Hey now.
This week you two are on your own. For his insolence last week, Tim has a playdate with a goblin pile driver.
But I thought you said you sent him here yourself.
Oh, well, yes, but I suppose that's true. Well, he did something to deserve more torture, I'm sure of it. Just do the best that you can. Don't mess it up.
Okay.
What are you waiting for, you adder-staffed bog farts? Go!
Pod. 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 Pod.
Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the official Quest for the Janklord podcast. I am your host, John.
And I'm your other host, Joe.
Before we start talking about the main topics, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I want to say thank you again to everyone who has been giving us feedback. We still love your feedback, and if you want to give it to us, hit us up on the email and title it something about podcast feedback.
We have been listening to your feedback. I know a lot of you have specifically addressed the fact that we do break the fourth wall. We are going to continue to do that because it does allow us to expand upon what we talk about outside of just Quest for the Janklord. So I'm sorry, but it allows us to kind of go into more details about magic in general, not just Quest for the Janklord. In addition to being on YouTube, which you can watch this podcast, we are on 7 different platforms, including Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, RadioPublic, and Spotify.
And all those links are going to be in the description of both the YouTube video and the various podcast
platforms. Yep.
Platforms.
So with that, I want to say, give a specific thank you to the patrons of Quest for the Janklord. You guys are a huge help in putting content together like this.
We have some footage going for you. It's going to be some arena gameplay. It might be some draft. It might be some brawl, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the topic we're talking about. It's just there so you're not looking at a black screen.
Exactly. And today's topic, we will be discussing and breaking down the deck techs from the holiday episode, where we were able to dress as our commanders. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go and check it out on YouTube. Some of the costumes, specifically John's, are very innovative.
Specifically Daniel's.
Oh, Daniel's is by far and away... It's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
It's my favorite.
If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. It is a fantastic episode.
I think I would say it's my favorite of our episodes thus far.
Me too. I agree. Me too. So we will kick things off by having John break down his deck from the episode, Gisa and Geralf. Take it away, John.
Yeah, so with Gisa and Geralf, I kind of broke it down into 6 main categories. Everything is going to fit within those categories for the most part. There's a couple little shenanigans in there that I included because we knew the colors of the decks that we were going to be playing against. So I knew that we had 2 mono white decks in there, and there are some cards specifically targeting mono white.
Yeah.
And they're pretty nasty, but they're pretty great. So apart from that kind of stuff, most everything fits in one of the 6 categories. So it is a legendary human wizard for 2, a blue and a black. It's a 4/4. And it says, when Gisa and Geralf enter the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. And then also, during each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard. So it has a lot of potential to be quite a powerful card. Mm-hmm. So the main categories that I broke it down into were zombies, self-mill, reanimate / recursion, blink, value / card draw, and then interaction. So of those 6 main categories, Gisa and Geralf really lend themselves to 4 of them. Obviously the zombies, you cast zombies from your graveyard. The self-mill, because it's already self-milling. The recursion, because it's recurring zombies. And then I thought that a fun blinky reusing my cards type of a strategy would be a lot of fun. So Gisa and Geralf, obviously it's an enter the battlefield effect. So I put a lot of enter the battlefield effects in the deck, and as much blinking as I could fit in there as well.
That is one of my favorite mechanics, so I applaud you for that. I love ETB, the battlefield triggers, where you either are milling yourself or interacting with the board in some way. So Gisa and Geralf is really fun in that way. Even if you just get a little value out of that card, you're filling up your graveyard so that you can actually pull cards out of your graveyard. So that recursion is a huge bit of it. I like that.
Yes, that's exactly right. I just love value engines. That's one of my favorite things in Magic is just value engines. So I've got a few really fun engines in here that once they get going, they're a little mana intensive, but they really are powerful. So the obvious category was zombies. So I stuffed as much zombie stuff as I could in there. Pretty much if it had an enter the battlefield effect and was a zombie, I threw it in there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, a lot of zombies have self-mill effects, which are really great, or target player mills effects, so you target yourself. So that was a really easy include. I think some of those would be like Return Centaur, the I'm looking here at my list and I can't find any more of those, but there's several cards that either mill myself or discard. Some of the things are maybe better off in the graveyard. So there's some discard effects in there. And I actually put discard as part of the main interaction strategy of this deck. Yeah. So I'm getting value from my graveyard, but other people aren't necessarily. And actually it ended up that you got a lot of value in your graveyard.
Yeah.
So making you discard wasn't necessarily the best plan.
You'd go discard and I'd go, okay, I don't mind that.
Sure. Yeah. Let's put that in the graveyard. Yeah. So one of my favorite includes that I never got to see was the Fallen Shinobi. It's a 5/4 zombie ninja. It costs 3, a blue and a black. It has ninjutsu for 2, a blue and a black. And ninjutsu is when you have an attacking creature, you can pay the ninjutsu cost and swap the attacking creature for your Fallen Shinobi. Right. And actually, I think it has to be an unblocked.
Yes. Yep. And
attacker.
You then replace the creature that's attacking with the ninjutsu card.
Correct.
Yeah. So it has to be in your hand in order to activate that effect. But it is very sneaky. And
it's super sneaky.
Obviously, you spent a lot of time with your mana untapped because you're a reactionary deck as opposed to doing big things right off the bat. So I wish we could have seen that. That would have been a really fun thing. I love ninjutsu cards.
I do too. So what it does is whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost.
That is nasty. That's so cool.
Such a huge effect.
Yeah.
I really wish I had been able to pull that off. I mean, it fits all the categories of value engine and zombies and
And I takes your opponent's cards.
I wish I had been able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just fun. Ugh, let me see that.
Yeah.
It's like the fun of playing Gonti.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
That's mine now. I'm the
That's
captain
mine.
now.
Give me that. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sad I never got to see that, but it was one of my favorite includes, so I thought I would share that. It also works well with a lot of the zombie tokens that I was making because, I mean, in the episode I didn't make a lot of tokens, but the deck has a potential to make a ton of zombie tokens. And if you're just swinging out with a bunch of zombie tokens, you just pop the ninjutsu on whatever one is unblocked, and here you go.
Exactly.
You got a 5/4 at you. Some of the other stuff, I mean, I could talk about like the Vizier of the Scorpion and Eternal Skylord. Those make your zombie tokens do things. So the Skylord is flying, the the Vizier of the Scorpion, I think, is Death Touch.
Yes.
So
Yep.
they make a zombie token and then they also give it an effect, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it worked
Yeah.
out. It's just a easy zombie include. Rise of the Tides was another one that I really wanted to pull off because I was self-milling a ton. So I thought that maybe I could get a bunch of instants and sorceries into the graveyard and just pull off a huge Rise from the Tides. And did I cast Rise from the Tides in the episode?
I don't think you did.
I think I
maybe you
don't
did.
think I did in the episode. I've played with this deck a couple times
Yeah.
afterwards, and I have cast some pretty disgusting Rise from the Tides.
Yes.
But I don't think the episode had it. But
So, real
that's
quick,
another one of my favorite includes.
We've talked about this across each of our episodes, but one of the really cool things about building a janky deck, like putting the limit of 79 cents on any given card, allows for some really goofy off-the-wall interactions or just big plays. Rise from the Tides is a perfect example of that. Like, you are aggressively self-milling.
Yeah, it wouldn't normally be a big play, but in a jank deck, if you're making 6 zombies for 6 mana, that's a big play.
Especially death touchy or flying zombies. That's fun.
They get really
Yeah.
fun when there's flying. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So zombies was an easy include. Self-mill, I think, is another easy include. Gisa and Geralf do it themselves. They mill you for 4. So it kind of gets the engine feeding itself. I had a ton of self-mill in there. So like I was saying, some of those zombies that self-mill you, I had a couple lands in there that were surprisingly under 79 cents. The Duskmantle House of Shadow.
Yeah. The old Ravnica
target player puts
land.
the top card of yes, the old Ravnica. Yep, puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Target player, so you could do it to yourself. And then the other one is the Nephalia Drownyard from Innistrad.
Yeah.
So that was a rare one that I didn't think would have been under 79 cents, but it actually was. So that's even better for 3 mana and a tap it. You put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard.
Yeah.
So
having the ability
just put it on the land
to do that over and over and over again. So it's not just one time 3 cards. That's the end of the effect, and the creature is just a creature, or the land is just a land. The fact that you can do it over and over again is where the value is, and that's really cool. That self-mill, finding a way to do it on a card. Like, lands are not that easy to interact with, so being able to put an effect like that on a land can be huge. It can make the difference in a deck. Also, like you were saying before, in this deck, I was trying to play a little bit more reactionary. So it's just another way to ensure that you're not going to have mana that you're wasting. Right.
You know, so if you don't do anything in response to anything by the end of your opponent's next turn or last turn before you, then you can just pump your mana into that and get your value out of it.
So I just want to say, I love this type of effect in blue and black, or just blue in general, because blue is a wonderful color that freaks your opponents out. So when you are playing blue and you pass the turn with all of your lands untapped, everyone's like, I'm gonna not play my huge haymaker cards because I don't want them to be countered and then I'm tapped out. I'm going to kind of try to play around a counter spell. So as a blue player, you can just freak people out. Even if you don't have anything to do, like your whole plan is just to mill yourself for 3 with this land, you can put the idea in people's head that you might take a card out of their hand with a counter spell or a removal spell. It's very
all about those mind games.
Yes,
and
yes.
I will say, in that episode, I bluffed counter spells so many times.
Yes.
I mean, I just left my mana up as much as I possibly could, and every time, and you actually did my politicking for me because you were so scared of me having a counterspell.
I know,
and I
how
didn't
you
have
play.
to have a counterspell in my hand.
You were playing blue, and I'm like, he's got a counterspell. Hold your card.
You said that so many times.
Yes.
I didn't even put that many counterspells in the deck.
Well, good for you. That was very well played. You freaked me out.
You
I
helped
always
me,
get
so
scared.
thank you for that. Yeah, I love it. So, yeah, I'm just gonna look at the counterspells. 1, 2, 3. I put 3 counterspells in the whole deck. Thought Collapse, Summary Dismissal, and Sinister Sabotage. So, yeah, I had 3 in the whole deck, and it just freaked you out the whole time.
Yeah.
So that's a win in my book. 100% a win, whether I won the actual game or not.
That you got to do something cool or freak somebody out was totally worth it.
Another thing that I did with the self mill was I had a couple like big splashy self mill cards like Fascination. So what Fascination does, it's X blue. It's a sorcery, and you get to choose one. Each player draws X cards, or each player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So 9 out of 10, that's the one I'm going to be doing. But it was a last ditch draw effort if I needed one too. So
I love modal spells like that where you have the
Yes.
choice. This one is especially cool because you have the ability to slide it up and down if you need a card draw in a pinch. Like you just need 2 cards to try to get back in the game or find some interaction. You can put a little bit of mana into it and draw a card. Or if you're late in the game, you can draw 17 cards, or it's just...
Or mill 17 cards.
Exactly. It's just fun having that ability to choose, okay, this is how this card benefits me in this case. So Fascination is a wonderful example of that.
Yes, and not only do you get to choose how much mana you want to put into it. So it's a delightfully versatile card, like you were saying. Another versatile card was the Discovery and Dispersal. It's a split card from, was that Ravnica Allegiance, I believe. Discovery is a sorcery for 1 and a Dimir, how would you say that, hybrid mana?
Pip. Yeah.
So a pip, yeah.
Yep.
So you either blue or black mana, so 1 and a blue-black. And it's a Surveil 2, and then you draw a card.
Yeah.
So it's kind of maybe a bad ponder.
Yeah, it works with the way you built your deck.
Exactly.
You are trying to aggressively put cards into the graveyard, so this falls into that architecture. Like if you're going to cast the first half of Discover Dispersal, you're just casting the Discover part. You gain value either way from being able to choose, okay, I'm going to put the top 2 cards in the graveyard no matter what.
Yeah, and that's that's part of that self-mill strategy. But the other half of it is really decent interaction. It's each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, and then discards a card. So each opponent is bouncing their highest CMC thing and then discarding something. If they have an empty hand, they just discard that.
I remember it was really tough on Daniel, the discard side of things.
Yes.
And so you were doing effects like that all the time where you were having him pick up his best thing on board and then making him discard it. And
I think the meanest thing, I'm trying to look at the list here. It was each player discards 2 cards, I believe, or each player discards 3 cards. That's it. Delirium Skeins. Oof. I think I played that. I played that on either turn 3 or 4.
Yes. Yeah.
And it
was early because it destroyed
Daniel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It kind of screwed me with mana because I discarded a land. with it.
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't. I think I discarded 2 lands with it, which was really stupid.
Poor choice. Yeah.
Yeah. But lesson learned, I guess, on that one. So part of the self-mill strategy is having a way to make use of that self-mill, which lends itself to the next part of my strategy, which was the reanimates or recursion part of my strategy.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of reanimation specifically, but I had a ton of recursion in the deck. One of my favorite interactions was the Archaeomancer or mnemonic wall.
Mnemonic wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
So both of those, when they ETB the battlefield, they return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So you get to blink that and return something.
Yes.
And then the other part of that was the illusionist stratagem or ghostly flicker. So I blink the mnemonic wall or the what was the other card I said? The Archaeomancer, and I get to blink something else. So
So you blink Gisa and Geralf and get 4 more cards into your graveyard.
Yes.
And then when you put the sorcery or instant in it, you get it back with Archaeomancer or Mnemonic Wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So I get to just cast that illusionist stratagem or ghostly flicker over and over and over, getting the value from it and the whatever other card I'm blinking. I guess what I didn't put in our outline here was enter the battlefield effects. I kind of maybe included that with the blinking, but this deck is super heavy on enter the battlefield effects, and a lot of those are on the zombies for obvious reasons.
Right.
The possessed scab also works pretty well with returning that instant or sorcery card. So there were several ways that I could get that loop going, which is, one of my favorite things to do, get a nice value loop.
One thing that I want to point out too is possessed scab is a zombie, and that works with Gisa and Geralf. And you can, if someone's being aggressive towards you, you could turn after turn summon the possessed scab from your graveyard and put it up as a blocker, get it back in the graveyard, and every time it entered the battlefield, you could get back an instant or sorcery. So, like you say...
I actually, it has the text that if it would die, you exile it instead.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, which is super unfortunate for me, but it makes sense.
Yes,
because it would be a little too easy to abuse it.
Right.
I mean, it's already easy to abuse it with blinking, but yeah. But no, legit, that would be really awesome if you could get that going. But unfortunately, it exiles itself. So it kind of, if you have to do one of those sacrifice, I had a lot of sacrifice things in the deck, like barter and blood. Everybody sacrifices things. It kind of is a non-bow with that, but what can you do? One of the cards that I really liked was the Theeldest Reborn. It was one of those cards in the deck that just, when I cast it, it was super impactful. And Theeldest Reborn is an enchantment. It's a saga, which means it's a modal thing. So it's 4 and a black, and as the saga enters the battlefield, after your draw step, you add a lore counter to it. So every turn it goes to the next
chapter.
phase of it.
Yep. They're called chapters.
Chapter, yeah, thank you. Yep. So when you first play it, each opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker. Already huge value.
Yes.
Everybody's sacrificing something. And on Dan's side, I think I made him sacrifice one of his 2 creatures.
Yeah.
I kept just hammering on Dan. And it wasn't necessarily on purpose. Brutalized.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutalized. It was... Yeah. What can you do? Sorry, Dan.
Sorry, not sorry. Trying to win.
Sorry, not sorry. It's part of the game.
Yeah.
Bro. So, yeah. The next mode is each opponent discards a card. And then the last one is put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it's it's everything.
Yeah.
It's interaction, it's value, it's delightful. I love this card.
Yeah. Like you said, Dan was down to 2 creatures when he had to choose which one to sack. Obviously, when you only have 2 creatures on the field, that hurts. Losing 50% of what you're trying to do, it's majorly impactful. And then you turn around and on your next turn, he has to discard a card.
Discard something. I know.
It's so
it's
brutal.
Horrible. It's so
brutal.
mean. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I talked about the blinking already a little bit. One of the cards that I really wanted to see, but I never did, was the Nephalia Smuggler. So that one, it's one of those engine effects. So it's a repeatable flicker. It's a little spendy to keep going. It's only a blue. So you can play it for a blue, and it's just a 1/1. But you can pay 3 in a blue and tap it to exile another creature you control and return it to the battlefield under your control. So you blink something every turn. And there's so much potential with that card to just get out of control with value. One of the cards also that I did get a lot of value out of, that I didn't think I was going to get a lot of value out of, was the House Guildmage. So at the time it was a newer card from Ravnica Allegiance. And it's not a zombie, it's a human wizard. So it's blue and a black, and it's a 2/2. And you can either pay 1 in a blue and tap it, and target creature doesn't untap during its next untap step. Its controller's next untap step. Or you can pay 2 in a black and tap it to surveil 2. So it's one of those reactionary cards that either you can tap something, or it doesn't actually tap the creature, but it keeps it tapped. So if you swung with your biggest creature, or if you have a mana dork out there that's really good, you keep it tapped, and it's kind of a little protection. But then you can also leave that surveil up. And I did that several times.
Yes, I remember.
I think I probably did that about 4 or 5 times.
It was
surveilling.
When you first put it down, in my mind, I was like, I don't really care about that. That doesn't really affect me in any major way. I don't think it gives you that much value. And you kept surveilling over and over and over again. I'm like, okay, can somebody please deal with that? Like, he is enabling his strategy. That's ridiculous. Get rid of that.
Yeah. And you know what? We talked about in our last episode with Tim about how you are really good at putting down these seemingly innocuous creatures.
Yeah, that's a perfect
example. And getting huge value out of them. And this is one of those creatures. I didn't necessarily intentionally put it in there that way, but it worked out to be exactly that. It wasn't a removal magnet, and it did a ton of work.
Yeah, and it just had this effect that maybe once it's not that big of a deal, but repeating it over and over and over again is a great way to get that little bit of value that kind of starts making people look at it like, okay, it's just a dumb 2/2, but we have to get rid of it because he's doing so many things with it. I
think someone did remove it eventually because it was just a problem. Blinking, I talked about blinking. We've talked about reanimate and all that stuff. The other 2 parts of this are what you would kind of put in any commander deck, which is like card draw and card advantage and value and then interaction. So a lot of my interaction was on those enter the battlefield effects. So like the Fleshbrag Marauder, which is a zombie, which is awesome. It's a 2 and a black, and when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature.
Right. So that includes the player that casts the Fleshbag Marauder.
Yes.
But
correct. And at the very worst, it's a sort of a 3-mana sorcery that everybody sacrifices a creature.
Yes.
Or I can just sacrifice away one of the many zombie tokens that I had hopefully been creating. Or what you can do is you can cast it every turn.
Yes.
With Gisa and Geralf.
Yes.
That's what I was looking for. Unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Right.
But I'll play this deck again, and maybe it will happen. So, yeah. I'm looking at this Lifebane zombie here. Oh, yes. That was one of the ones that I want to save for the end because it was a color-specific
yeah.
item.
Yes.
I had a lot of discard in the deck the rotting rats and the miasmic mummies, when they enter the battlefield, they make everybody discard. The skin render ended up being a really good card, and that was one of the ones that I had with my engine, with my mnemonic wall and illusionist stratagem engine.
Yeah.
I was blinking the skin render as well as my mnemonic wall, and it was putting -3 counters on everything. So I'm going to read.
Yeah, that upset me because you kept targeting my
Yes.
stuff, and I didn't like
I know.
that. I was
I know.
I need this. I need this.
You were going crazy though, Joe.
I was.
You were a
I
threat.
was.
You
Yeah.
were a big old threat. So skin render, to read it off, it's 2, a black and a black. It's a zombie creature, 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you put 3 -1 counters on a target creature. So it's limited spot removal, but those 3 counters can be put on the same creature over and over if something's getting out of control, or it can just pick off a little creature.
Yeah.
So that's one of those ones that ended up being a lot better than I thought it would be, but it worked out really well.
An important distinction there too is where something like the Fleshbag Marauder might just spot deal with a creature that you don't get to choose. It takes something off the board on all 3 of your opponents.
It's a target. You get to choose. Yes.
And the -3,
that's
-3
huge.
doesn't just have to kill something every time. It could take something down so that it is killable by another player. So let's say you can't take down one of my cards I have on the field. The ability to be able to just put counters on it, which would incentivize people to go after that creature, is also a great politicking card. So I think we did have specific discussions about, okay, what's he going to do with the skin render? Where are those counters going? Like,
Where's it going?
what's the play
Exactly.
here? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. You definitely tried to get that thing pointed away from you many times. Yeah. One of the fun interactions I had in this deck that I actually have included this card in every single deck I have ever built that has blue and black in it. And I have never drawn or played this card.
Ooh.
And it's called Brine Shaman. So it's 1 and a black. It's a 1/1 human cleric shaman. So it's not a zombie, but this text, Joseph,
I'm ready.
So you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to make target creature get +2/+2 until end of turn. Or you can not tap ability. It's not a tap ability. You can pay 1, a blue and a blue, and sacrifice a creature to counter target creature spell.
Ooh. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
It's one of those cards I love everything about it.
Yeah.
It's an engine card. It's interaction.
Plus
it's everything I want.
It's repeated counter spells. That's so good.
It's a repeated counter spell.
In
It's a
that
counter
shell,
spell on a stick.
You can put your zombie in the graveyard. You'll get it back with Gisa and Geralf anyways, and just counter their biggest thing. That's so good.
Exactly.
That would have made such a huge difference.
Use tokens. You can use tokens as sacrifice fodder, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those cards. I've never drawn it.
Oh,
And I put it in every single blue-black deck I've ever built.
that would have been
And
so
even
cool.
like Muldrotha. Like it's in my Muldrotha deck.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've never drawn it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it's just
And I've
too
seen you
powerful
go
to be
through your
played.
entire Muldrotha deck. That's hilarious.
I know.
Crazy.
I've milled it a few times.
Yeah.
I have milled it. But it's been at the time where like it's too late. I can't cast it, blah, blah, blah. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. One of these days, me and Brine Shaman, our fates will align, and I will be countering
Things
all
will
the
go
creatures.
off. Yeah. Your catchphrase that day will be no. No. No.
You wanted to play a creature? No.
No.
No. So, yeah, that's the main gist of this deck. I put a few counter spells in there. I put some draw spells in there. Monastery Siege is one of those engines. You get to draw an additional card and then discard a card at the beginning of your draw step. So you're basically drawing 2 cards. You get to put one into your graveyard, which is not a big deal for this deck. Necromancer's Stockpile is another one of those cards that is super powerful, and I never got to play it in our episode. But it's an enchantment, and it's 1 in a black, and you can pay 1 and a black to discard a creature card. You draw a card, and then if this discarded card was a zombie a zombie card, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. So not only are you cycling through your deck for very little mana, you're making zombies as you do it. So it's one of those crazy value engine cards.
Yeah.
I never got to play it, but it's
fun.
I feel like in this kind of deck it'd be super fun.
Yeah.
So I've noticed in our decks we lack board wipes.
Yeah. I think that too is a restriction of building a deck with cards under 79 cents.
Yes, I think there's enough that are under 79 cents, but they're all in that like 6 and 7 mana range. Mm-hmm. That just they don't really work very well.
Yeah, it's tough. A lot of times you'll have a board wipe, but it won't be the most optimal. It'll be too expensive or
yes.
Yeah. So
or it doesn't. Yeah, it's not a true board wipe. I put Mutilate in this deck. It's all creatures get -1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. Mm-hmm. It's 2 a black and a black. So it's a 4 converted mana cost card, which is in the realms of, that's a good board wipe.
Yes.
But
yeah. It
again,
might
it's a
not
little
catch
conditional.
the biggest things, but it'll
Exactly.
at least get rid of everything on the ground that
Hopefully you're getting at least 3 or 4 out of it.
And that's one of those
Hopefully.
targets for Archaeomancer. Like maybe early game, it doesn't have that much value, so you bin it, right? You send it to the graveyard because you don't get anything out of it. And your opponents, myself included, don't really keep track that well of other people's graveyards. So you could just have that there as like the hidden board wipe for later in the game when things get gummed up. Oh, guess what? Archaeomancer, I get it back. Everything is gone now. Everything. Like, I've got 10 swamps. Bye-bye.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The 2 little nuggety cards that I included in this deck were Putrefaction and Lifebane Zombie. And I know nobody's ever heard of at least Lifebane Zombie. It's from M14. It's 1 a black and a black. It has Intimidate. It's a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a green or white card from it and exile that card.
Oh, that's so rude. That is so rude.
Super gnarly. So
every other deck at the table was green or white.
Yes, you were in green, and Tim and Dan were both mono white.
Yeah.
So unless they were holding a land in their hand, I was gonna get a card out of them. And the chances were pretty good. I'd say that I was gonna get something from you if I had targeted you with it. So that was a fun little color shenanigan one. And the other is Putrefaction. And I didn't know about this card until I started building this deck. It's an enchantment. It's a little expensive. It's 4 and a black, so 5 mana. But whenever a player plays a white spell or a green spell, that player discards a card from his or her hand. So
rude.
You have to make the choice.
Right.
Every single time you play a card, what am I getting rid of?
Yes.
So I really, I keep talking about the cards that I really wish I would have seen in the deck and never really did. But this is by far and away the number 1 card that I wish I had gotten to play.
So much fun.
But didn't on the episode. Yeah. Yes. So that about does it for my Gisa and Geralf deck. So Joe, you played the Gitrog Monster.
Yes.
On this episode.
So this episode was the holiday special. So the demon gave us a little holiday surprise and slid the decimal point over. So instead of 79 cents, it was $7.90.
For the maximum cost of our commanders. Cards.
Yes. Very, very much a good call out because we couldn't put cards in our deck that were up to $7.90.
Right, just the commanders. So, but I was able to get the Gitrog Monster. I drew the Gitrog Monster that way, and I don't know if you know this about me yet, but green is my absolute favorite color in Commander. I know
so
this about
I was beyond tickled to get that as my commander card. And let me read what the Gitrog Monster does real quick. So the Gitrog Monster is 3 black and green for a legendary frog horror with Death Touch and the text, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog Monster unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. So I just want to say right off the bat, this card in its text, this commander, has everything that I love about Magic. It draws cards, it sacrifices lands, it allows you to play additional lands. If I could sum up exactly what I do as a Magic player, it's play lands and draw cards. Those are my favorite things.
That is Joe.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And typically you have to do that in green-blue, but this is green-black, and the Gitrog Monster is such a good card. Now, when I first
it goes about it in a little bit of a roundabout way.
Yes, yep.
Because it kind of turns it into a little bit of a lands matter deck. So at the very least, with the Gitrog Monster, you're drawing an additional card every turn.
Yes, yep. Because you have to sacrifice that land.
You might not draw another land card to be able to play, but if you build him any reasonable way, you're always going to be finding those land. You're going to have land in your hand.
Yes, exactly.
So, but where this card gets crazy is on that bottom line of text.
Yes. Specifically from anywhere. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere. So they don't have to be on the field. They can be in your hand or in your library. You draw a card. So
yes, it gets out of control so fast.
You talked about self-mill. I turned the self-mill theme up to 10 with the Gitrog Monster. I was churning through my deck. And let me say, when I first started building this deck, I was confused because the knee-jerk reaction when you hear about sacrificing a land is that's how I cast my spells. What am I going to do if I don't draw land and I end up losing all my land and then I can't cast any spells and I no longer have a monster on the field? So
right. Oh, it's a downside.
Yeah, it's a downside. It appears at first to be just a hindrance, right? But the Gitrog Monster allows you to play an additional land, and he refills your hand with whatever land goes into the graveyard. So it's not strictly a detriment, which is something I kind of had to get around because it's a very technical deck. A lot more technical.
Get around in your mindset.
Yes, exactly. Because I'm from the camp of firmly believing that lands should be on the battlefield and nowhere else. And this deck highly encourages you to put lands elsewhere. I had to look at EDH Rec to kind of get a general idea of what people were trying to do. And the first thing I noticed was that lands are so important in this. That seems like a very obvious statement, but especially on a budget, you want to make sure that each of your lands does something not just on the battlefield, but also in your hand, in the graveyard, in the deck. Lands everywhere are important. So,
how many lands did you have in the deck?
I had 42, which is a lot of lands in a commander deck.
And you also had instants and sorceries that fetched for lands.
Yes. Yep. So effectively, I was running around 50 lands with my ramp cards.
Yes, a wild amount of lands.
I am so happy to do. John, you can attest to this. Just in playing regular Magic, I love land. My Omnath list, which I mentioned in the last episode, it's lands. It's not lands all lands, but it's a lot of land. And so I to get back to the point, I put a lot of focus into making sure that each of my lands had some utility outside of just tapping for mana. Part of my deck, like I said, I want the Gitrog Monster on the field so I can start drawing through my deck pretty aggressively. So I put some cycle lands in there like Barren Moor and the Tranquil Thicket, both the green and black cycle lands. And because it wasn't just that I was cycling and then getting one card, I was getting 2 cards back because of that bottom line of text of Gitrog. If a land went to the graveyard from anywhere, I was drawing a card.
With those cards, that cycling one, that is 1 mana, draw 2 at instant
discard
speed.
1, draw 2.
When Gitrog's on the battlefield.
So you're getting 1 card out of it. but really you're getting 2 because you don't mind putting that card in the graveyard. I had a lot of recursion I'll talk about a little bit later. But in addition to the cycle lands, I also included lands that could either come back on their own or had an effect for being sacrificed. Because again, part of that Gitrog text is, on your upkeep, you sacrifice a land or sacrifice Gitrog Monster. So there is a balance that you have to keep in mind. It's not just being aggressive with destroying your lands and drawing cards. You do still have to put lands on the battlefield in order to cast spells, because there's more parts to this deck than just the lands. But one of the cards that I want to spotlight is the Drownyard Temple. It taps for a colorless, and you can pay 3 to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So in light of doing nothing else and just having Gitrog, I can sacrifice that land and then get it back. So I draw a card, and it costs me 3, but it's one of the ways I can consistently keep lands going to the battlefield so that I'm never to a point where I'm eating my only resource.
Right. And it's an instant speed effect too. You don't have to
main phase.
You don't have to
it's
do
not
it
sorcery speed. Exactly.
Main phase every turn. You can do it if that's what you're needing to do in that turn.
I know since I've played the deck beyond that episode, I've definitely come across that where I have nothing else to do. It's in the graveyard. I might as well get it back and sack it again at the beginning of my turn.
Right. Leave up your murder or your putrefy or whatever.
So it just works. It's a good little engine there on its own with Gitrog. And then another card that I did take advantage of maybe twice or 3 times was Dunes of the Dead, which taps for colorless, but when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So
now every turn with the Gitrog Monster, you're drawing 2 cards and making a 2/2 zombie.
So that card was actually a lot of fun. I was able to get it back a few times and sack it over and over again to get a 2/2 zombie and then draw a card. So I really like that card. This also makes cards like Evolving Wild or Terramorphic Expanse get that extra little bit of value because you're sacking the land, which gets you a draw trigger.
Yes.
And then you're also going and getting a black or a green source from a forest or a swamp that actually helps you pay for the cool things that you want to do later down the road.
I also noticed that you had Harrow in this deck, which is along the same lines. And normally that's a little bit of a risky card, but in this deck, it's so good. It's crazy.
There's all of my creatures were very purposeful. None of them were really that great, but they all did a little bit of something. And another version of Harrow is the Springbloom Druid, which is 2 and a green for a creature elf druid.
Yes.
When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library.
Which is the exact same text as Harrow. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, it just gives you a 1/1 body for 3. So same cost, it just leaves a blocker on the battlefield, which is fine.
I guess Harrow is a little better because you put them onto the battlefield untapped, but with the Spring Bloom Druid, you get the body. So it's a little trade-off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A little trade-off. And it works because like I said, my creatures weren't that powerful. I'll kind of go over a few of them, but I had things like Acidic Slime, the Caustic Caterpillar, your Arbor Elf, the Deathcap Cultivator, the Groundskeeper, which you can pay 1 and a green to return target basic land card from your graveyard to your hand. I did that a couple of times. I think you asked why I was bringing cards back from my graveyard to my hand. And it was because of the Groundskeeper.
That's right.
Then I have a few payoff cards like Jotty Offshoot, which is 1 green for a Defender 0/3 wall, or plant, excuse me. And it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under you control, you gain 1 life. So that's a nice little way to get a little extra value.
Yeah, that land, that repeatable life gain, even if it's just minor, that can be a big thing. And
it adds up.
It really can add up, especially when you're playing 2 lands per turn or more.
Yes.
I mean, you can probably easily gain 3 life a turn, and it's just just that extra value. That can be tough to deal with.
With cards like Springbloom Druid or Harrow, And then just Gitrog himself allowing you to play extra land.
Yeah.
There were, multiple ways in which I could glean a little bit of value off of playing additional lands each turn, which is a very powerful effect. And having it attached to your commander, it's pretty wild. It was a lot of fun.
It's wild. It's pretty wild.
So I'm going to go back to lands for a second, because one of the key lands, and this is in all Gitrog decks, regardless of budget, is...
Let me guess.
Dackmore.
Oh, just kidding.
Dackmore Savage.
Yes.
I'm just kidding. I said it
guess.
wrong like 3 times in the episode. It's Dackmore Salvage. I still can't get it right.
Dackmore Salvage.
Dackmore Savage. Got it. So let me just read what Darkmoor Sandwich says real quick. So it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add a black to your mana pool. I don't care about any of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of it. I don't care about that. It has an effect called Dredge 2.
Oh my goodness.
So Dredge says if you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly 2 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, draw a card. So it's a replacement effect. If you go to draw a card, instead you can mill yourself for 2 and then put Dackmore Salvage back into your hand. Since Gitrog says whenever a land enters the graveyard from anywhere, you draw a card. If Dackmore Salvage is in the graveyard, you can say, instead of drawing the card, I'm going to mill myself for 2 and get Dackmore Salvage back. And I played that with another creature that doesn't look like it's a big deal, but it actually is a huge deal. One of those innocuous creatures that you don't think too much about.
Was it Noose Constrictor?
The Noose Constrictor.
I knew it.
Yep. 1 in a green for a creature snake, 2/2, that has reach, and then discard a card. Noose Constrictor gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This took me a long time to understand why this card in specific, or other cards like it, are so powerful. Because, again, it's one of those things where it seems like discarding a card just to give it +1/+1 isn't that great, but it is a free discard outlet. Now, again, this feeds back into Gitrog being on the battlefield. When a land enters the battlefield from anywhere...
The graveyard.
Or land enters the graveyard from anywhere, you draw a card. And the way this feeds in with Dackmore Salvage, and I did this in the episode.
I remember.
Is I discard Dackmore Salvage. The trigger goes for me to draw. I replace it with the Dredge, and I get it back to my hand and mill myself for 2. Now, there were a couple of tricky things, too, where when I was milling myself, I would mill a land, and I would have a draw trigger in addition to getting the Dackmore Salvage back. I put another card in there that was just strictly to keep myself from milling out, and that is... Let me see if I can find it. Gaia's Blessing. It's 1 in a green sorcery that says target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library, draw a card, or when Gaia's Blessing is put into your graveyard from your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library.
So you can just keep that going infinitely. You can just go and go and go and go and go. Mill, draw, mill, draw, mill, draw, mill, draw.
So I had a few things that kind of fit in with that also had Dredge as part of their text. None were as good as Dackmore Salvage because, again, it was a land. It ticked all the boxes that Gitrog cares about. But another example of a Dredge creature that I had was the Golgari Brownscale, 1 green for a 2/3 creature lizard. When it's put into your hand from your graveyard, you gain 2 life, and it has Dredge 2. So same deal. If you would draw instead, mill yourself for 2 and put that card into your hand. So it's got a little bit of life gain. I just wanted it for that Dredge trigger. Finding things under 79 cents with Dredge
tough
means you're finding
like 3 cards.
Yes. Another card that I put in that had Dredge on it was the Necroplasm. 1 black for a creature ooze 1/1 that says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on Necroplasm. At the beginning of your end step, destroy each creature with converted mana cost equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on Necroplasm. And then it has Dredge 2. So this card I used to politic because it grew every turn. And in those early turns, and I had it early, it was a key, like, politicking card. Like, just don't mess with me and I'll get rid of the Necroplasm. I had a way to sacrifice it. I don't remember exactly how. But I was constantly able to kind of keep, like we talked about with your deck, those board wipes aren't necessarily optimal. This is a great way to threaten people's small things, like your House Guild Mage, the 2/2 for 2 mana. That easily falls into the trap that Necroplasm presents. And the fact that it has Dredge 2 means that I can continually replay it and threaten that pressure on the lower end of the board.
Sure.
It's highly unlikely that people are going to let it live very long, especially late into the game. You're playing things for value that aren't necessarily your win cons, but even still, a 1/1 or a 2/2 could be pretty instrumental to what you're trying to do.
Right. Yeah, I had questioned you in the episode as to why you were sacrificing it, because I thought to myself, I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just let it get the 1, 2, and then the 3 counters on it and just let it keep destroying stuff? And then, of course, you dredge it when it kills itself. But yeah, I had wondered why you did that. But so that makes sense. You were trying to pressure the 1 and 2 drops on the board. So that makes sense.
But then to feed into your point, a lot of the creatures I was playing, a lot of the spells that I was playing permanent were in that 1 and 2 drop slot. So I didn't want to lose cards on my board to my own effect.
Yeah.
And honestly, the way I built the deck, I felt it was better in the graveyard, giving me that option to mill 2.
That makes sense.
Exactly. Because with the way the Gitrog works, that dredge mechanic is just draw 1 or maybe more, really, what it comes down to, depending on how many lands you mill.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I had a couple of other land payoffs because I couldn't always count on the Gitrog being there. It's a huge engine on its own, and that does draw a lot of ire from other players. So I had land payoffs like the Rampaging Baloffs, which is a wonderful card, but that's 4 and 2 green for a creature beast 6/6 with trample and landfall. The landfall is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast token.
That is powerful. That is super powerful.
Yes.
In any green deck, that seems good.
Especially when you're playing more than one land per turn.
Yeah.
Or using your Harrows or your Spring Bloom
goodness.
Druids or Rampant Growths to go and get that extra land and put it onto the battlefield.
I'm just going to throw down 4/4s. No big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's another huge payoff card, and it was below 79 cents. It's been reprinted a bunch, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's something that needs to be dealt with immediately. Otherwise, it can mean the end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a clock.
Putting 4/4 bodies on the battlefield is no joke.
No joke. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in our specific game there, when it was mono white, and then a blue black that aren't really known for making big old creatures. Yeah, those 4/4s are a big deal.
It puts a lot of pressure on the board. So it either encourages people to come up with an answer for Baloths, or they're going to get run over by just the pressure of 4/4s attacking every turn.
That's a big old threat.
And then a couple of other creatures I had in the deck that took advantage of lands. This had more to do with lands being in the graveyard, but the Turn Timber Sower, which is from the newer, I think Commander 2018 or 2019, it's 2 and a green for a creature elf druid at rare. It's a 3/3, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, create a 0/1 green plant token.
Delightful.
So that is another way of putting bodies that block big creatures or block creatures in general. And then I had the Wood Elves, which goes and looks for a forest card when it enters the battlefield. So if the creature didn't do something that interacted with the board, then it was either fetching lands for me Or I had things like the Reclamation Sage.
It enters the battlefield and destroy target enchantment or artifact.
Yep, and same thing with Acidic Slime, another creature.
Except that hits lands too. Acidic Slime's a great card.
It is. It really is. And it's why it costs so much. It's why it costs 5 instead of 3.
For a 2/2.
Like Rex Sage. So it's 3 and 2 green for a creature ooze 2/2 that has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land.
Yeah, it's a 2-for-1.
Another great piece of value. Like we talked about in the previous episode, I don't necessarily look for the biggest haymaker cards. I look for things that aren't obviously a threat, but when you put down Acidic Slime and you destroy somebody's land, let's say they're stuck on land, that's so mean. It's so mean, and it draws so much ire. But it's one of those cards that you just get value out of no matter what it hits, right?
And even, you can destroy like a key land, like somebody's Rogue's Passage or something, which turns out to be a really good card in our meta.
Yep. And again, this is an example of a card that's been printed a bunch and is a pretty low price point, but you'll find it as just a main staple in a lot of like more powerful green decks because it can, when you're coming up against like Mazaviths or the new card Scophos, being able to destroy that land or a land that draws cards or pumps creatures or gets
Solarian
back.
Academy or whatever.
Yep.
I'm going to counterpoint that that thing that you said about having little pieces that build up. You played a card that was immediately known to be a threat, and that was Faith of the Devoted.
Yes. Yep. I was just going to talk about that.
Oh, good.
With aggressively going through my deck and discarding cards and drawing cards, I wanted a way to kind of pressure the board outside of just what the Gitrog allowed you to do. And what John just said, Faith of the Devoted was one of the cards that took advantage of that. It's 2 and a black for an enchantment that says whenever you cycle or discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So that was mean. I had a turn where I went off with that and I was constantly discarding, and I did like 30 points of damage across the board, 10 points or 12 points to everyone.
It was so nasty.
Yes.
You were gaining all that life. It was brutal. And immediately I'm like, in this deck, that is going to be a problem. I don't remember how we dealt with it, but I think we did.
I think Tim got rid of it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I got to do some nasty things with it right off the bat, and then it was pretty quickly understood that that's not a card that should remain on the battlefield.
Right, yeah.
Given how my deck was functioning. But I had some other benefits from discard outlets so that I wasn't only getting value from Gitrog Monster, I would also get a little bit of value from discarding a land.
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't see but I really wanted to come across was Ayula's Influence, which is 3 green, so green for an enchantment where you discard a land card, create a 2/2 green bear creature token. Another one of those free discard outlets. I don't have to pay any mana to discard, and I get a 2/2 body out of it.
That's huge.
And I get to draw or dredge.
Exactly. It could have been another piece like Noose Constrictor to your little your combo, to your engine, your combo, and better because you're making 2/2s.
Bodies. Yeah, constantly putting bodies. I had another card that didn't have that free discard outlet, but it did offer a little bit of mill in addition, and that was Crawling Sensation, which is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Whenever 1 or more lands are put into your graveyard from anywhere for the first time each turn, make a 1/1 green insect creature token. Again, not as good as Ayula's Influence, which didn't have a cap on its ability, but still being able to kind of fix your draws at the beginning of each turn. That's fun. It just adds incremental value over time. Again, it's capped at 1 per turn. So if you're discarding on opponents' turns and
which I helped you
discarding lands, you still get up to 1 per player's turn. So you could still potentially get 4 insect tokens in a turn cycle. It just puts out a little blocker for creatures on the ground that don't have trample or aren't a flyer.
It's that little incremental value that you're all about.
Yes. I also had other land payoff cards, like Retreat to Hagra, 2 and a black for an enchantment that had landfall, where either I can give a creature +1/+0 and Death Touch until end of turn, or what I would always choose, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life.
Of course.
I'm playing a lot of lands. I want to gain that life. I'm not doing much else except for playing lands, so any bit of life gain, I'll take it, especially if it hurts my opponents. So I was apt to ping or even just straight up deal 2 damage and gain 2 life.
And unlike Faith of the Devoted, you don't have to pay that 1 mana. You just get that value.
Right. You just get that value. And so I gained a little bit of life that way as well and pinged people. And then I have a saga of my own in the deck, which is 3 green. It's called The Mending of Dominaria. And the first 2 chapters are put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So that's all right. I'm more concerned about getting cards into my graveyard. But the final chapter, chapter 3, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, then shuffle your graveyard into your library.
Huge.
Even without the Gitrog Monster, if I have something like Retreat to Hagra or the Behemoths out on the battlefield,
oh my goodness,
I get a ton of 4/4s. I gain a ton of life. It's just that incremental value, and then all of a sudden it's an explosion of value.
Exactly. Yep, that's what you do. That is Joe's style.
So that's kind of the main focus, how I enabled the combo. I had some, your basic removal in there, the Doomblade, like you mentioned, Harrow. I had Murder and Naturalize. So I built the deck with a fair amount of enchantment and artifact removal.
Yes.
Because the reason I put all that artifact removal in there was because I was afraid of Tim.
Well, rightfully so, because, spoiler alert, he won.
I thought Tim was going to play Odric with a ton of equipment, which is how I had built Odric in the past. And I thought he would build that deck with an equipment package. But he relied mostly on creatures with the keyword abilities, because Odric gives all of your creatures a set list of keywords at the beginning of each combat. Not just your turn's combat, but each combat. So if you have a creature with flying and indestructible out, at the beginning of combat on each turn, all of your creatures get flying and indestructible. So if that runs away, that's kind of hard to handle.
Yeah, it's a very powerful effect.
Yes.
With the right keywords, it's crazy.
Yeah, I put in a ton of equipment or artifact and enchantment removal. Then I had a little bit of card draw, which is kind of redundant with how the deck works. But you need Gitrog to be out there in order to take advantage. And then I had a few payoff cards like Worm Harvest, which you can retrace from your graveyard to make a 1/1 black and green worm creature token for each land card in your graveyard. Another way to just put a couple of small blockers or even attackers on the battlefield if that's where the game is at.
One thing that you got a lot of value out of, or at least some value out of, was the Seer's Sundial.
Yes, yep. That was one of the 3 pieces of equipment or artifacts that I put in the deck. And the Seer's Sundial is 4 for an artifact that says landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Given how efficient the deck was, this was just a way to get myself back in it if ever I found I was lagging behind. It kind of acts as that additional card draw if the Gitrog Monster isn't on the battlefield.
It's kind of a replacement Gitrog Monster. It's a little less good, obviously.
You have to pay for it.
You have to pay for it.
But it is a good way to kind of shore up the gap that's left when Gitrog Monster isn't on the field.
Exactly.
So another piece of what you kind of talked about, I was aggressively going through my deck. That's what this deck is designed to do, is mill 50 cards in one turn.
Yes.
Or mill 100 cards in one turn. Sometimes I would mill things where I'm like, oh, I actually want that back. So I had a few creatures that got things back, like the Baloth Null. When it enters the battlefield, return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. The Golgari Find Broker, same deal when it enters the battlefield. This is actually better. When it enters the battlefield, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. So I can go and get a land that I didn't have any other way to get back, or I can go and get, an artifact or an enchantment that was destroyed.
It's Eternal Witness. I suppose no, because Eternal Witness is any card.
Right, so you can get instant and sorceries back.
Right. So it's a little less good than the Eternal Witness for a little bit harder to cast too. So, but I mean, it's still a fabulous card, especially in your deck when most of your deck is built up of permanent cards.
Exactly. Yep. A huge amount are built off of permanents. So
yes.
That was the other thing where I have to have things that enter the battlefield. I'm in the same camp as you. I love enter the battlefield effects.
Yes. Value.
Yeah.
Blinking, engines. Yes.
Yes. Yep. Being able to do something over and over and over again. It feels fantastic. It's not necessarily fun for everyone else, but it's really fun to do. So
it's fun to do. I agree. I wanted to point out a card in here. I don't know if you got to play it or not. I don't remember you playing it, but it's an interesting card because one thing that you are very good at in deck building is making symmetrical effects asymmetrical.
Where it benefits me, to clarify, where it benefits me and nobody else gets anything from it.
Or your benefit is greater than the benefit that
Mm-hmm.
other people would be getting. Correct. So the card I'm speaking of is Girapur Ori. It's an artifact for 4 mana. Each player may play an additional land on his or her turn, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards.
Yes. So that's another thing that kind of works in place of Gitrog. If I have one of my free discard outlets on the field, I'm just going to be discarding aggressively. If I don't get those cards back, this allows me a way to, say, gain a little bit of life at the end of someone's turn by discarding my hand.
Right.
And then getting those cards back. Now, like you say, asymmetrical. This allows everyone to play an additional land.
Right.
But nobody else was ditching cards the way I was ditching cards.
Exactly. And nobody is getting value out of their land drops like you are. I mean, it's really nice for white and blue-black to be able to play more lands, and you think, oh, that's going to benefit them way more than it benefits us. But you were actually doing things with those land drops. Like, you were making a lot of value.
Right. I wasn't just playing a land and that was the beginning, middle, and end of the story. I was playing a land and getting a creature or drawing a card or...
Yeah, gaining life, draining, absolutely.
And then, in addition to Gaia's Blessing, to kind of keep myself from milling out, I also included a copy of Elixir of Immortality.
Yes.
Because...
Classic.
I don't want to go through my whole deck and then on my turn lose because I have no cards to draw. That would be awful.
Yeah.
And something I don't want to happen. So I put it in there just in case Gaia's Blessing got taken out or it's in the graveyard because I wasn't able to dredge it away.
Right.
Then this is another way to kind of protect my deck from having horrible things happen to it.
Exactly.
And then at the budget level, another concern is if somebody exiles your graveyard, that kind of kills the whole plan.
Yeah, which there's
really
plenty of ways to do that. Yep.
It takes your legs out from under you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the whole deck. Yeah. I had some other cards in here that either went and fetched for lands, or another fun card that I used was Creeping Renaissance, which is choose a permanent type, return all cards of chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. So that's a way to get back a ton of lands, then again to discard, to draw, to make bears, to ping.
That's awesome. You didn't play that, did you? Because that would have been quite memorable had you been able to.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think I had it in hand, but there was never a scenario where the board was set up in such a way for me to make a splashy play like that. It's still a good card. Like, if you have been losing all of your creatures, great, get all your creatures back. If you've been losing all of your lands, great, get all of your lands back.
Yes.
So it's just a cool card. Now, a card that I wish I had put in, but I didn't, because I didn't really understand what was happening. This seems like an auto-include, is Sir Conrad. So Sir Conrad is 3 and black for a legendary creature, human knight, 5/4. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put in the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then he has the activated effect of 1 and a black. Each player puts the top card of their library in the graveyard. The main thing that makes this card so good in Gitrog is the mill effect. So if I'm dredging, I'm constantly putting creature cards in my graveyard. And if I can get Gaia's Blessing in the graveyard every time, I could ostensibly go through the whole deck over and over and over again, infinitely, and drain everybody out. Or just ping everybody out.
Does it say creature cards? I don't. What did you say? Is it creatures or just cards?
It's creature cards.
It's
so
creature cards, which makes sense.
And I'll have to do a bit of digging in order to get that to go. But if I can set the board up in such a way and Sir Conrad is on the board, that's just a win.
That's one of those cards that looks like it's incremental value, but it becomes a bomb when you pair it up with the right card, like Creeping Renaissance or something.
It takes a lot to get it to the point where I can constantly dredge, constantly draw, constantly recycle, and constantly deal damage.
Right.
But once I have it online, I just keep going. It's, again, a lot of fun for me, no fun for anybody else.
Well, you idiot.
Yeah.
You should have put it in your deck.
Exactly. So I've learned my lessons. I've since updated the deck to include Sir Conrad. Easy include after learning how to pilot and run the deck. Even though John gave away who won that episode, you should definitely go check it out. Our decks,
yes,
with the exception of Daniel, are all displayed pretty well. Like, we all had a chance to take the driver's wheel. It was just that Tim ended up, winning the day. So, but it's a great showcase of what we were talking about with this episode.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was a really fun episode to do. Really, really fun.
And again, in addition to the decks and playing the decks, we all wore costumes that were of our commanders.
They were magnificent.
So,
magnificently janky.
yes, wonderfully
the
janky.
whole episode, you get to see me flipping the veil off of my face.
Yes, of the Gisa part of your costume.
The Gisa part of my costume, yes, the little veil. Dan did a good job of editing a lot of that out, but
yes,
I was constantly
doing
flipping
the
that
motion
thing out of my face because it was so annoying in my face. It kept falling in there.
So definitely go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. It's probably, like you said, it's your favorite episode. It's my favorite episode that we've put out.
Yeah. I think it's most of our favorites of our gameplay episodes. So yeah. Well, that's fun. That Gitrog Monster deck was awesome. I felt like my deck was super fun to play.
Yes.
If you, the listener, think that you want to play one of these decks that we have built, we have a TCG player affiliate link, and you can click on that link and it will take you to the deck and you can buy it from TCG Player. The prices might be a little different from when we played it on the episode, just because that's how price variance goes. They might not all be under 79 cents. They're both still very budget decks.
Yes. Yep.
And very affordable. So yeah, if you want to pick those up, you can. Thank you for listening. We, again, are on a few different things other than YouTube. So you can check us out on Anchor, Breaker, Overcast, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, RadioPublic, and Spotify.
Yep.
If you want to take us on the go and you don't want to have a YouTube video up in the background.
Exactly.
So, that's a great place you can check us out.
Another way to help support us and keep this podcast and the general series going is our Patreon page. We have giveaways. We have the Wheelmaster designs proxies and send card proxies and sends those out to patrons at the $10 and up level.
They're delightful.
They are wonderfully janky proxies.
I will put up a couple pictures of them on the YouTube version of this podcast. We also have some shirts available on Etsy. The shirts we have available are of our logo. And also we have a shirt of the Mirko's Mind Drink. The little glass of gnarly milk-looking stuff that was a part of this holiday episode is available. So if that's something that tickles your fancy, we have it available on Etsy. And all of these links are going to be in the episode description on both YouTube and our other partners.
And another fabulous way, free way to support us is just by word of mouth. If you have a friend or a couple of friends who enjoy EDH gameplay, budget EDH, there's a little something here for everyone. Or they just like good storytelling, check us out on YouTube. Spread the good word of Quest for the Janklord. We appreciate it tremendously.
And the last thing I just wanted to say was, again, we love your feedback. So if you have feedback, send us an email at questforthejanklord@gmail.com. And thank you for listening.
Stay janky.
Stay janky. Stay janky.
Pod.
Quest for the Janklord.
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 If I just did this while we were recording, do you think this would be noticeable?